Jack, you were a federal prosecutor and also worked in the county district attorney's office. What hot issues are facing law enforcement today?
Sure. Being a state and federal prosecutor in Delaware County and in the eastern part of Pennsylvania was one of the highlights of my public service career, quite honestly. The ability to go to work every day and to do justice for folks really was a strong motivation for me, almost as strong as the motivation I have now to do the work at Treasury to help people save for college and save for people with disabilities. The hot button issues for law enforcement, and there's many of them. One is just the crisis and epidemic of opioids in this country. It has swamped every community, including mine, Haverford Township. Delaware County had over 200 deaths last year, people who have OD'd from opioids. And that's with the fact that our law enforcement in Delaware County, all of them are carrying Narcan, which is a substance that allows somebody who's suffering an overdose to they can actually resuscitate and stop that overdose from taking that person's life.
How long have they been carrying that?
For a few years now. Actually, Delaware County was the lead in getting state law passed to require law enforcement, or to allow them, quite honestly, and every medical technician to start carrying Narcan, to make Narcan much more available. This is sort of a miracle drug for people who are suffering overdoses. But unfortunately, in some ways, it's also enabled some people to think that they can still overdose
and not worry about it.
Right. The opioid epidemic has led to another epidemic, or has bled into the epidemic of heroin use. And that's when this stuff really, really turns deadly. Because once opioids are prescription drugs, right, and there's a cost to them. So when somebody gets addicted to it, after a while they oftentimes have to turn to crime, petty crimes, oftentimes, but sometimes they're serious robberies, armed robberies, for example, to feed their addiction. Heroin is a similar drug that they can buy illegally at a cheaper price. You do have to shoot it up generally intravenously. That's where people who are addicted sometimes aren't willing to take that step, but we find so many of these people now, the heroin epidemic, and there's always been a heroin problem in southeastern Pennsylvania, particularly in the city of Philadelphia. The heroin we get here is so pure that a lot of people end up moving from opioids to heroin. And now they're even using a drug called fentanyl, which is deadly. And that's where we're seeing all of these ODs that are deadly. And you're seeing stories in the Philadelphia Inquirer about in Kensington, which has been an open heroin drug market for years. People from the suburbs who are now, addicted to opioids are moving and coming up and visiting places like Kensington to buy heroin and shoot up. It's a real tragedy. It's destroying families all across this Commonwealth. Attorney General Shapiro has been leading the fight with his partners in the DA's office, and I would tell you our department, Treasurer Torsella and I just took on this issue last week. We took on one of the big drug distributors of opioids, McKesson. With two other state treasurers, Treasurer Torsella signed a letter asking their shareholders to write a report and get to the bottom of what the company is doing about the opioid crisis, and also to start changing the board of directors, to separate the job of CEO from chairman, so that there's some independent voice there who's not just worried about the profits. We joined with two other states, as I said, and with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, and the company listened. The shareholders took some action. They refused to agree to the compensation package for the CEO, and they agreed to separate those two positions. And we're hopeful that they're eventually going to write this report. And we're going to take on some other distributors. This is big pharma has created this problem in many ways by pushing the sale of opioids in a reckless and irresponsible way. People have gotten addicted in many cases not of their own volition. There's so many stories of people who have had workplace injuries or have had sports injuries for young people, and they're prescribed opioids and overprescribed. Sure. So big pharma is responsible, doctors in many cases are responsible, and the individual folks themselves are responsible.
Yeah, well, you certainly can't have just big pharma responsible without the doctors who are prescribing the drugs.
That's absolutely right. And Pennsylvania has taken action by requiring doctors who are prescribing opioids to enter that information into a database so that we can start seeing who's giving who what drugs and what amounts. And eventually you're going to see more prosecutions, I predict, of doctors who are essentially turning into pill markets. There was a couple federal prosecutions recently. I know the Attorney General's office is working on this as well. Local DAs in many cases are as well. In Montgomery County, the district attorney just charged somebody with homicide, somebody who pushed opioids and heroin onto an individual who died. So there's a many-faceted approach to this. It's a public health issue, but it's also a law enforcement issue. And this is, Larry, to your point, this is one of the areas where law enforcement is taking a more modern approach. We know we can't arrest our way out of any problem anymore. We have to work collaboratively with other people in our society. So this is both a public health crisis and a law enforcement issue, and you're only going to solve it by working together with the community to do so.
This is a good segue to lead me to my next question. You note that it's more than just a crime issue when people take illegal drugs. Is every crime prosecuted, and who has the discretion to charge a certain individual with an offense as a drug-related offense or an offense that's not to be pursued at all in the first place?
Yeah, not everybody does get charged. You're absolutely right. One of the most powerful positions in our society is that of a prosecutor. In state, and there's two systems, as you know. There's the federal system of justice and there's the state system of justice. There's two different sovereigns. And generally, the feds do about 10% of the crimes they prosecute, and 90% are done by the state. So even though the feds oftentimes get all the glory, it's really state prosecutors who are doing a lot of the work. And in the state system in Pennsylvania, the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth, but each of the 67 counties has a district attorney who's elected to be the chief law enforcement officer of that county. And they're the ones, that's where the rubber really meets the road in terms of street crime and in terms of local crime and protecting those communities. It's the district attorney's offices in partnership with the state attorney general that deals, and they have the discretion. The charging function can be taken away from local police, for example, by a county district attorney if he so chooses under Pennsylvania law.
And who sets the policy within a particular county?
That's the district attorney. The district attorney, that individual who's elected to that job, is both a county officer and a state officer. They represent the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in criminal matters within that county. It's a very powerful position. And again, it's where the rubber really meets the road in terms of protecting communities.
Now, does a district attorney, meaning the elected official, the top man or woman, as the case may be, of the office, does he or she see every crime that comes into an office?
No, they don't. It depends on the size of the county. Pennsylvania is very divergent in the size of the county.
Take Delaware County, for instance.
Right. Our county is 500,000 people. There's probably when I was there was about 9,000 cases a year that came through the system. So no, the DA doesn't see every single case. He has to rely on his assistant district attorneys and his deputy district attorneys to sort of run the office. There's a hierarchy. The DA gets involved personally in high-level cases. He also has a group of detectives, sort of his own police force. It's called, in Delaware County, it's called CID, the Criminal Investigation Division. And they do their own investigation. So the DA has to oversee that unit of people, and he has to oversee the cases that are coming out of the police departments. In Delaware County, there's 49 different municipalities. So you have to depend upon your assistants to a great deal. And quite honestly, as an assistant district attorney, I had tremendous power in the courtroom every week. I was responsible for determining what sentences, what plea bargains we were going to offer to people, and whether we were going to plea bargain cases, or whether I was going to try the case. So yeah, even as an assistant district attorney, I had tremendous power over people's lives in the criminal justice system.
Who set the policy of the office?
The DA sets the policy of the office. I mean, that's really the district attorney's #1 job, is to make sure that all of the assistants are on the same page in terms of following the policies that he's outlined, the priorities for the office, and provides the training and the oversight so that everybody's following the same mission.
In the news, we hear about a federal independent prosecutor, and even on the local news from time to time, we'll note that a special prosecutor has been requested. What is a special prosecutor?
Sure. First of all, you know, what's going on nationally, again, there's two separate systems of justice. There's the federal system and there's the state system. People are probably familiar right now, obviously, with Robert Mueller's investigation of the Trump administration and its meddling by Russia in the 2016 election.
And we remember Ken Starr decades
Exactly
ago
right.
with the Bill Clinton investigation.
Exactly right.
So it comes
Now,
up from time to time.
Exactly. Now, it used to be that there was an independent statute. There was a statute in federal law and there was a statute in state law that allowed the appointment of a completely independent prosecutor. Those statutes no longer exist. Bob Mueller, is my understanding, he's been appointed by the Deputy Attorney General, and he's using Department of Justice resources to conduct an investigation. The difference is this is his only case, right? And nobody in the department is overseeing or directing that investigation. In the U.S. Department of Justice, when I was an assistant federal prosecutor here in Philadelphia region, there was always somebody in a hierarchy, depending upon the case I had, that I had to answer to and report to. Public corruption cases, for example, are always supervised out of Washington, D.C. In the federal system.
When does a government hire a special prosecutor? And again, federal or county level?
Usually in the state system or in the federal system, if there's a special expertise needed, or if there's a potential conflict of interest. So under Pennsylvania law, for example, most local crimes, the first jurisdiction goes to the district attorney. The district attorney, if he believes that he has a conflict of interest, can kick that case usually to the state attorney general. It's rare cases that I'm aware of that a DA would bring in a special prosecutor, although he's able to do that into his office to do that. But usually what they do under the Pennsylvania system is to ask the attorney general, and that's provided in the Commonwealth Attorneys Act. That exact system is provided where a DA can refer a case to the state attorney general for prosecution.
And it also can go to a neighboring county for a conflict of interest, correct?
Correct. Usually it's done by the state attorney general. I think the Kathleen Kane case was very interesting in that regard, exactly to your point, because she was the state attorney general. She was being investigated by the Montgomery County District Attorney because the locus of the crime took place in Montgomery County. But they asked Michelle Henry, who was an assistant district attorney in Bucks County, very experienced prosecutor, who's now the first assistant state attorney general, interestingly enough, to participate on that because of her expertise. They brought her over and asked her to take part in that prosecution.
So I believe you did say who makes that decision, but for a county to request a special prosecutor, that is made by the district attorney himself.
Absolutely, or herself. The district attorney is the chief executive officer of that office.
Jack, that's all we have time here today. I want to thank you for helping out with all these state issues.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks for joining us. My pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Meet the Expert. Please tune in next time on Delaware County Political News. Tune in for part 2. Jack Stollsteimer talking about the Haverford Dems.